Hello and welcome to Love Your Job, Love Your Life podcast. But this is a slightly different one. This is part of the spiritual awakening or the men's spiritual awakening mini series that I'm doing. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Robert Thompson. Robert, we've just been talking and he said, I said, how should I introduce you? And he said, I'm Robert, just Robert.
Robert.
Just Robert. But just to build on that. So Robert is a successful businessman. He's got multiple businesses. He's an entrepreneur. And I'm delighted to be joined by him today because we know that the topic of men's mental health is a big topic in the world today. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing these men's spiritual awakening series. And Robert was introduced to me a few weeks back by somebody else who we both know. And it's very kindly agreed to share today on the podcast his story. I'm not going to take the thunder away from him around his story, but his story is a very sad story, but actually at the same time has got a lot of love in there that I think people can really take something away from this. So Robert, welcome to the podcast. You're in the US today on business. It's a beautiful sunny day there, and it's rubbish here in the UK. So
it sure is. Yeah, it sure is.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Now, just to get this started, I've just explained that you're a successful entrepreneur. You've got multiple businesses. Let's take it back a little bit in time because there was a significant period in your life, relatively recently, that made you stop and made you stop and think about what you're doing. Do you want to just start by kind of sharing the kind of the front end of the story?
Okay, not a problem. So, just thinking about the timeline here, probably around 2020, during the dreaded COVID outbreak. I've been working 100 miles an hour up until that point. And that COVID period was a massive disruption to a lot of people, a lot of businesses, a lot of families. Don't really want to go there because it wasn't the greatest period, but I'd be working and got to a period where my body just crashed. And automatically you think to yourself, okay, is that a byproduct of COVID, long COVID, viral fatigue? And I never really got to the bottom of it. Obviously I went to the doctors and the doctors said that I had a viral load and they did blood tests, but my body was shot. Couldn't get out of bed, headaches, stomach issues, this, that, and the next thing. And it's quite easy to put it down to, well, I've had COVID. I've had COVID. I'm one of the unfortunate ones, got long COVID now. And in reality, whether it was COVID or whether it was not, it was my body shutting down pretty much and saying enough's enough. And that was a difficult period for me because obviously working as I've done or operating as I do, with ambition, with hard work ethic, and then all of a sudden then stopping was a shock to the system. But a wake-up call, because you naturally try and fight what your body is telling you not to do. And that was a real challenge. And that was, just trying to think of the dates now. So it's December into January. And it was hard because it wasn't just the physical element of it was the mental, because then I wasn't able to do half the things that I wanted to do. And I was just trying to figure out how do I fix this? Because my natural persona is to fix things in life, and I couldn't fix it based on the tools and the education, the understanding that I had at the time. And then, as I was going through these months of not being able to function and certainly not firing off on all cylinders, then my wife, unfortunately, we say fortunately, and hopefully the fortunate element will be the positive side that will come out of this. But unfortunately, she got rushed into hospital and got diagnosed with colon cancer. I happened to be away in the US on business at the time, so I had to fly back, and it was all quite traumatic as well. And emergency operations, and going through that cycle of her cancer has been very traumatic, coincided with me, having my body shutting down as such and not operating. That transpires that my wife, who's amazing, but has had such significant challenges as a byproduct of the cancer, stage 4, which means that it metastasizes into other elements of the body. Liver, she's had lung cancer, adrenal glands, this, that, and the next thing. Over a period of time, significant rounds of hard chemotherapy. But with that came, she was absolutely amazing and fantastic in terms of her approach to not fighting the cancer, but embracing it, and embracing the challenges that she was presented with, both individually and as a family unit, which actually helped me significantly in terms of, trying to understand what was wrong with my sort of body shut down at the time. And that's where the story began, James.
Wow.
That's where the story began. So yeah, big ups, yeah.
As you started to get to a point where you figured out, and I say figured out, I don't think anyone ever really figures some of this stuff out, but you made some decisions, I know, and took some things into your own hands to say, actually, do you know what? I also need to look after myself here, because if I don't, heaven forbids, something drastic might have happened to you. So what was the sort of the light bulb moment that says, do you know what, I've got to do something about me? Because you're a successful entrepreneur, you're a man, and I know this because I've been through not as much as you, but I've been through things with dark thoughts, etc. And you sit there and we don't open up, we don't talk about these things, we think sometimes that we're going to do something, and it's like, well, I can't do that. I'm going to be ridiculed, or I'm going to be laughed.
Yeah.
And so there's this, you say you're just Robert, but this Robert that the outside world sees is a successful businessman.
A persona. Yeah.
So what was the light bulb moment that made you kind of think, actually, I've got to figure this out and I've got to change?
Yeah.
Change. That's the wrong word.
Yeah, I think with the light bulb moment is that the light bulb, it's not like you've turned the light on and it's all glowing and you've figured it all out. And maybe the example to use is how does the light grow? Yeah. So for me, it was, I needed to do something, clearly, because I just can't continue to operate like this. And I've got even further challenges and responsibilities to my wife and to my children to ensure that I'm super healthy. Forget everything else, business, whatever. I have to be present. I have to be there for them and as a support network. And likewise, I want to feel good. And this was for me, the really interesting thing, because you're presented with a challenge without understanding or educational tools of, how do I do this? How do I get better? How am I stronger, both physically and certainly mentally for the family and myself? So I actually embraced it because it coincided with my wife having a similar sort of approach in terms of her challenges of her health, and simple things that you bring into your life that you're educated on. Okay, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. And again, because of the type of character I am, whether that's good, bad, or indifferent, when I decide to do something, it's like, I've done it. It's one extreme to the other. And so I said, well, I'm cutting alcohol. I'm not drinking anymore. Done. I did, in my past life, because I'll call it my past life now, the way that I used to operate, I didn't have the greatest patience. And I thought, I've got to really be patient, because, when you study and you educate yourself, it's evident that when you have this situation where your body crashes, it's not as a byproduct of what you've done the previous week. It's what you've done the previous 20, 30 years or whatever in your life, which is compounding to get to the position. So my thought process to that was, okay, I need to show extreme patience to improve and get healthy. And that was really difficult. That was, a challenge. And, but I've got better at it. So, one of the things I did, as I said, stop drinking, straight away. Again, in combination with my wife, we start looking at our diets and things like that. To be fair, we ate healthy before, but there's always a lot more that you can do, and being mindful of the type of foods as well, and some of the rubbish they put in food. So we made some significant changes there. But James, it wasn't one thing. It was a whole host of things which we brought into our lives, I brought into my life. And when I say it's not one thing, I'm not exaggerating, where there's thousands and thousands of things which are out there as supports, tools. And the important thing, and I can sit here and I could spout off 50, but I don't want to bore you. But, the interesting thing is for me is that, and I figured this one out very, very early on, is that there's no boilerplate recovery to you or me or anyone else. It's really, you have to do what works for you, and you have to, you have to enjoy it, because that's part of the recovery, but you also have to open yourself out to be very open-minded, and try multiple things as part of your recovery.
Yeah.
What my nan used to say to me, God bless her, she would always say to me in life, she'd say, you've got to try these things. If you don't try these things, then you can't really cast an opinion of whether it's good or not. Yeah. Very simple.
Very true.
But very true. So, so we, multiple changes to my life, physically as well. And this, the patience is a contributing factor to this, is that when you stop drinking, then over 8-week period, 12-week period, 16, whatever, you start to see subtle changes of improvements. And that manifests itself into feel good. Why? Something's happening, something's working.
Yeah.
What's the next thing? So I cut out drink. Why? Exercise. So I exercise every day, and I'm not that I'm some buff gym guy who has a massive 6-pack or whatever. It's just consistency. And everything I'm bringing in is consistency. And then you have that, and that releases great endorphins, feel goods, and then obviously the spiritual thing, which was a massive thing for me.
So let's just hold fire. We'll come on to the spiritual thing in a minute.
Okay.
That's been a massive thing for me as well. But I just want to emphasize a couple of the things you've said there. You're absolutely right. There are, when you start this journey, or you're not in a great place, irrelevant of what that is, there are 1,000 different things that you can do. And if you go to 10 different people, they'll tell you 10 different things.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you have to be patient. There is nothing that isn't, in my view anyway, there is nothing that is an overnight fix. There is nothing that you can click your fingers and go, I'm done. And therefore, it has to be different for everybody, because what I say motivates one person, it's not necessarily motivation, but what helps one person won't help another. And I remember a personal journey, not so long ago, actually. It was only probably about 18 months ago. And I hit a bit of a down spell. And that was 3.5 years on from my real down spell.
Yeah.
And my wife was saying, James, you need to do this, or you need to do this. And she'd just send me stuff constantly. love her to bits. But I said to her, I went, stop sending me stuff. And she said, I'm only trying to help. I said, you're not helping, you're overwhelming.
Yeah.
Because you've sent me 5 different things, and I could do all those 5 different things, but I can't process them.
Yeah.
I have to do one thing, and then if that doesn't work, move on to another and move on to another. So if anyone's listening and is going, well, where do I start? You almost have to, and this for me is then we move into the spiritual piece, because for me, I sat there and I said, James, what do you need? What is going to help you? And I started listening to my intuition and my guides, and that helped me to realize what I needed to do. So let's move forward, because the spiritual piece is this is one of those things, Robert, that I've been a spiritual guide in the closet for many, many years.
Yeah.
I've had crystals and I've done pendulum work and color work and all that, but nobody ever knew about it, because I was a director in a big corporate business. And I was like, I can't talk about that kind of stuff. Everyone think I'm weird. But now I talk about it all the time, because it's a huge, huge part of my life. So where did you get or what opened up from a spiritual perspective that made you kind of go, actually, let's explore this in a bit more detail?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. I'm trying to pinpoint, was there a particular day or what have you? I think it came about predominantly, again, with my wife's approach and everything that she was going with, because obviously I call it the combined challenge, right? But her challenge is far greater than mine, but let's call it the combined challenge that we had at that period of time. You go through a period of mourning, in a way. You're sort of mourning your previous life, or how things were operating, or what have you, and your future, or your perceived future, is tragic, black, dark, whatever. And in a way, we felt that we had to. There's an element that you have to go through to get out the other side of it. But actually, what I actually reached out to a therapist. For me, this is, we were talking about what works for some people, what doesn't work for others. I found it more therapeutic for me to speak to people that I didn't know. Don't ask me why. It's just who I am. And I think part of that process, when I was having therapy, there was an element of mindfulness that was brought into the discussion points. You then share that information with Katie, who was doing her own thing as well. And I think what you also find is that people within your networks that you didn't expect to have that little bit of knowledge would then suggest things and recommend things. And if you're then open-minded to all of, then it just builds and builds and builds. And we were fortunate; we had friends that were a lot more versed than we were in spirituality and the tools that come with that, and the sort of the direction or the angles or the different angles that you can get from that. So we just kept trying things, and because we were grieving, we were sad, physically and emotionally. So, you're not going to not want to try these things. And that's how it came about. And the thing I love about it, I hope my wife doesn't mind me saying this, but I call her the White Witch, right? Because she's super smart when it comes to all these different things that are available. And she maybe like your partner, James' wife, she would say, there's this, there's this, there's this, there's this. But she doesn't overface me with them. And she very much is like, look, I'm just telling you, try it. If it doesn't work for you, not a problem. But it is amazing. Our spiritual journey is amazing. You have to have a consistency, I find a consistency is so important to it. So I'll do things, I meditate every day. Okay. And people's perception of meditation might be that you have to sit there for an hour, cross-legged, in a somewhere in the countryside with funny clothing on. I don't know. But it's not that. And, my meditation routine is straight after my workout. So I do a workout every day, half an hour, an hour. Then I do breathing and I do a meditation. That meditation, sometimes it can be 10 minutes, sometimes it could be 20 minutes. But there's always a consistency to that. But James, I've done everything. I do sound baths. I've been in fields of healing with load of women and chanting and all these weird and wonderful things. But it's amazing. Some of them, okay, I wouldn't always go back to doing, but a lot of them I do, and a lot of them I bring into my non-negotiable daily routines now.
Yeah. And I love that. I won't, but I could just show you around my office, and you'd see some singing bowls, you'd see a shamanic drum, you'd see a little altar with things on it. So I'm exactly the same. And I totally agree with you, Robert, around the consistency and the amount of people I talk to that say, I just can't get into meditation. And they say, I try it and then I don't do it because it doesn't work. And the first question I ask them is, how long did you try it for? And they say, a couple of days. And it's like, you need to go at it for really 21 days with non-negotiable 21 days. Yeah. And as you say, it doesn't have to be an hour. It can be half an hour or 15 minutes, but it's the process of doing it. And I'm the same. I get up at 6 o'clock every morning.
Yeah.
I do an hour of meditation every morning.
Yeah.
And then have a coffee, start the day with my wife. Yeah. And then I go off and do a run or a walk the dog or whatever it might be. But it's so important for me. It's that routine and consistency that really makes a difference. So
I think with the meditation as well, and again, people who struggle with meditation, I always say to them, look, put yourself into a calm position, wherever it might be, somewhere in the house where it's just quiet. And when you go through that meditation process, do not feel guilty that your mind is still thinking off piece, still thinking about things, because actually that is the meditation process. Because I found that very early doors, just like, okay, meditation, I need to zen out, I need to clear my head, not think about anything. Well, I was far from that, and I was being bombarded all the time. And what you find with the consistency of meditation is that eventually you're able to deal with that, and you're able to just slow down and bring calm to your mind. So I would say to anyone who's starting off, don't worry, don't beat yourself up. It'll work itself out.
Yeah. One of the reasons that's kind of close to my heart, Robert, is I put a post out last week about my journey in 5 years ago of nearly driving into the Central Reservation on the M25. And the amount of support that I got from my network around that was phenomenal. And I then had a few follow-up conversations with people that I hadn't spoken to for a while, men that actually said, reading your post made me stop and think. And actually I've been thinking those same things. And one guy spoke to his wife about it last Friday. And it's the first person he'd ever told in 5 years of having these thoughts. I guess this is the problem, right? That I'm trying to address, and that I can't do it on my own. And there's lots of people out there that are doing it. As men, we don't necessarily open up. We don't necessarily share. We could sit here and talk about singing bowls and meditation and our spiritual journey for hours and hours and hours.
Yeah.
But it's not common, because most people will just sort of brush it under the carpet and move on. In your view, what can we do more of that helps men feel that it's okay to share and to talk and open up and look at these alternative things? Because you're absolutely right. I went to a kirtan on New Year's Eve. Me and my wife, I was the only man there. I went to a breathwork session. I was the only man there. I've been to singing bowl sessions. I'm the only man there. yeah, I know there are hundreds and hundreds of people out there that probably would be open to it, but don't do it because they have the fear of being the only man there. So is there anything that you can think of or that we can do that sort of says that how do we help more people say it's okay to feel like this, open up, to share and to try and not be ashamed of it?
No, yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think what tends to happen is that it takes situations of extremity where you know, our stories, where you're then faced with, I've had all this trauma, I've got to do something. It's been building up to this, where in reality, what we're not educated on from a very young age is the necessity to look after ourselves, both mentally and physically. Mentally being the most important one for me. And it's a difficult one because it's not like all of a sudden you can switch a button and then say, we'll just do this and everyone's in good shape. Firstly, I think there's a responsibility of those people like you and I that have been down a certain journey where it's okay. For the most part, we've figured it out. And that's one thing I'd just like to mention as well, James, is that, you know, we still have peaks and troughs. It's not a perfect flat line it's always a challenge every day. And I think it's important that people understand that when they see or hear these stories, that it's constant work, consistency. So I think, you know, I've been thinking about this and you could say, well, this is my first, you know, rodeo, the way of giving back and trying to, hopefully people listen and they understand. But even in my home environment, even in my work environment, there's certain things where even now, when I'm speaking to my children, the thing at the forefront of my mind is, right, okay, managing stress or expectation, putting those building blocks in place, reinforcing the life itself in terms of what really is priority and what is success. Because success, when I was growing up, was how do I get out of this place and how do I earn more money and how do I, you know, create this persona of this individual who's not got everything but has got a lot more, and that is not success really. So education is a massive thing. As I said, I speak to my children and I'm very mindful of that. And even in the work environment as well, I'm now looking at ways to introduce to my staff, my colleagues, time, putting certain things. I haven't got it all figured out yet, but it's starting to manifest itself in what is a necessity to say, look, you know, what you're doing here is great and I'm really proud of you all, but it's not the be all and end all. And you have to make sure that you give yourself time to yourself. And that's another thing as well, because in my previous life, my priority was never me. My priority was always others and what I had to achieve. And in a silly sort of way, but that's how my mind operates, I would say if I gave myself time to have extra rest or whatever, I was being selfish.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It is really difficult. We're wired from an early age in terms, as I mentioned before, education. I think if the more people are talking and if they have in their own mind an element of the importance of giving back and being there, then it's only going to then transcend itself into great well-being for all.
Yeah. And you know, what that last thing you said about we often put others before ourselves.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I was at a men's circle in London this week, and there was 8 of us there, and I think 5 of us were talking about the same thing, which is, you know, we always put, whether it be our wife, whether it be our children, whether it be our work, we always tend to put something else ahead of ourselves. And you know, the comment that I made to a few of the men that were there, which is, I was, and to a degree I still am. I still need to do more work on it. But I said, if we prioritize others ahead of us, what happens to us? And if we don't prioritize ourselves,
Yeah.
then the danger is this person that's talking in front of you may not be here, which is one of the horrifying stats around men's mental health. It's just horrific. Had my mum not called me at that precise moment on the M25, might not be here talking to you. And I know your story is probably exactly the same as that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and I think, especially when you get to, I don't know what the stats are, but obviously it's early 40s or whatever it might be of men in particular. And, it's tragic. And, the stats behind it tells a story.
Yeah.
And yeah, there we go.
Well, look, I don't want to end on a doom and gloom on this one.
No, let's end on a positive. Yeah.
I think for me, the key thing that's come out of this conversation is that if someone's listening and they're struggling, there is lots of support out there, but it's about finding what's going to work for you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, whether that is starting by, giving up alcohol or drugs or whatever it might be, that brings clarity to the mind, all those things. You don't even have to do that. You just have to start by journaling or more importantly, finding someone to go to. And there are people like me and like you that have been there. And that's part of this, is to open up to say, look, it doesn't matter what level you are, how much money you earn or you don't earn, it's a problem out there, and there are people there that are willing to help and to support. And I am really grateful for all of the spiritual stuff that I've learned. And I'm really grateful for you to come on, Robert, and share your story.
Yeah, I just like to add one other thing to that, James, as well, is that the tools that you need are all free. And that's really important because, naturally with anything, people think it's going to cost me a lot of money or it's going to cost me a lot of time. But it really doesn't. And those subtle changes, I'd always say that those 1% changes that you can bring in make all the difference, because ultimately those 1% improvements compound, manifest to far greater improvements. And hopefully this has helped. If we've helped one person, then we've achieved something.
Yeah.
So I thank you for the opportunity to share a little bit of my stories.
No, thank you, Robert. It's been a pleasure to have you on here. And, it's not an easy thing to openly talk about this stuff, especially in the world where, we try and keep things behind closed doors. So I really appreciate you being so honest and transparent, because, as you say, if we can help one person, and this brings one person picking up the phone to a friend, a family member, someone that they don't know, you, me, then that's a step closer, and that's helping one person. So
absolutely.
Thank you very much for joining me, Robert. I've really enjoyed the conversation, even though it's a hard conversation. It's, there's some really great stuff to help other men as well. So thank you for joining, and enjoy the rest of your business trip in America.
Thank you very much, James. All the best.
Cheers.
Take care. Bye-bye.